People always say love makes you better. That it lifts you up, fills the empty places inside you. But I don't know if what I felt for Theo could be called love. It wasn't soft or sweet. It didn't make me better. It consumed me. The first time I noticed him, it was nothing remarkable. He sat at the edge of the classroom, his head bent over his notebook, writing. Something about the way his hand moved across the paper caught my attention, the steady rhythm of his pen, the quiet intensity of his focus. He didn't look up once, not even when the teacher called on someone across the room. I thought, how can anyone be so lost in their own world? By the end of that week, I couldn't stop looking at him. Theo wasn't the kind of boy people flocked to. He wasn't loud or brash. He didn't fill the hallways with his voice or gather crowds with his charm. He was quiet, always on the edges of things, and yet, he felt larger than life to me. There was something about him that drew me in, though I couldn't explain what it was. Maybe it was the way his dark hair fell over his eyes, the way he pushed it back absently when it got in the way. Or the faint freckle just above his left eyebrow that I'd only noticed after staring at him for hours. I started looking for him everywhere, in the crowded hallways, the cafeteria, the library. My heart would leap the moment I spotted him, even if it was just the back of his head. But he never looked at me. At first, it was enough just to see him. To watch the way he moved, the way he tilted his head when he listened to the teacher, the way his lips curved slightly when he was concentrating. But then the hunger started. It was subtle at first, just a flutter in my chest, a faint ache when he passed by without noticing me. But the ache grew, spreading through me like fire. It wasn't just that I wanted him to notice me, I needed him to. I started sitting closer to him in class, hoping he'd turn around. I'd drop my pen on purpose as he walked past, praying he'd stop to pick it up. I even started wearing my favorite scarf, the one my friends always said made my eyes stand out, thinking he might finally see me. But Theo didn't see me. Not even when I was right there. Every day, I hoped for something different. I thought, today will be the day he notices me. But every day, I sat in silence, watching him from afar, and every day, my hope withered a little more. It was so painful, the way he walked past me like I was invisible. Each time it happened, it felt like a blow to my chest, a sharp, hollow ache that I couldn't ignore. My stomach twisted, my heart clenched, and a lump rose in my throat, but I could never let the tears fall. How could I cry over someone who didn't even know my name? When I looked at Theo, the world faded. His quiet confidence, the way he moved, the way his eyes lit up when he talked to his friends, it was all so vivid, so alive. And yet, I felt like a shadow. A ghost drifting behind him, desperate for his attention but too afraid to ask for it. I'd hear him laugh with his friends, and it felt like a knife twisting inside me. I wanted to be the one who made him laugh like that. I wanted to be the one who knew what made him smile, who could read the thoughts behind his deep, quiet eyes. But I wasn't. I was just a girl sitting in the background, unnoticed and unimportant. The hunger grew slowly, like a fire smoldering in my chest. It wasn't just that I wanted him to see me, I needed him to see me. Every time he ignored me, it felt like I was being hollowed out, piece by piece, until there was nothing left but this aching void where he should have been. The pain was unbearable. It was like I was starving, like every glance he didn't give me carved out a little more of me until there was nothing left. I would lie awake at night, staring at the ceiling, imagining what it would feel like if he looked at me, if he said my name, if he smiled at me the way he sometimes smiled at his friends. I started dreaming about him. In one dream, he was sitting across from me in the library, his eyes locked on mine, and I felt like I couldn't breathe. In another, we were walking together in the park, our hands brushing. But my favorite dream was the one where he held me. Just held me. But those dreams always ended the same way, with me waking up, alone in the dark, the ache in my chest worse than before. One night, I dreamed of devouring him. It was vivid and strange, the kind of dream that lingers long after you wake up. In the dream, Theo stood in front of me, his eyes finally meeting mine. He smiled, but before I could say anything, I reached for him. My hands weren't hands anymore, they were something else, something monstrous. And then he was inside me. When I woke up, I was trembling. My heart pounded so hard I thought it might burst. But instead of feeling horrified, I felt relieved. In the dream, he had been mine. Completely, utterly mine. And for the first time, the ache in my chest was gone. I tried to push the dream out of my mind, but it wouldn't leave me. It followed me through the days, whispering in the back of my head. I started imagining what it would feel like to hold Theo, to pull him so close that he couldn't ever leave. By winter, I couldn't think about anything else. My grades started slipping. My friends noticed the change in me, but I couldn't bring myself to tell them what was wrong. How could I explain that I was starving for someone who didn't even know I existed? It was a cold evening in December when it finally happened. I was walking home from school, my breath visible in the icy air, when I saw him ahead of me. He was alone, his hands shoved into the pockets of his jacket, his head bowed against the wind. It was like something deep inside me finally broke free, the ache, the hunger, the desperation. Something in me snapped. When I saw Theo that day, standing in front of me, so close yet so far away, it was like everything I had ever felt collided into one raw, urgent need. My heart hammered against my chest, and it wasn't enough to just look at him anymore. It wasn't enough to just watch him from afar, to dream about him from the safety of my own mind. I needed him. I needed to possess him in the way I could never possess anything else. I reached for him without thinking, my hands trembling as they closed around his wrist. The sensation of his skin beneath my fingertips was electric, but it wasn't enough. I pulled him toward me, my breathing sharp and shallow, my mind clouded with a kind of hunger I didn't understand but couldn't stop. His eyes were wide, his confusion mirrored in the way he instinctively pulled back. But I wasn't letting him go, not now, not ever. It was as if everything else in the world had faded, all noise drowning out, and all I could hear was the thunderous beat of my own pulse in my ears. Theo! I called, my voice trembling. He stopped and turned. For the first time, his eyes met mine. And then he saw me. I don't know how to describe the moment when his eyes met mine for the first time. It was like the world stopped spinning, like everything I'd ever wanted was finally right there in front of me. For a split second, I forgot how to breathe. It was like everything else disappeared, the cold, the street, the world. It was just him and me, standing there in the fading light. And then, before I could stop myself, I reached for him. His expression shifted, fear, confusion, maybe even a bit of curiosity, but it didn't matter. Nothing mattered anymore. The moment I touched him, I knew I would never be able to let go. I closed my eyes and let instinct take over. I don't know how to describe what happened next. One moment, he was standing there, his eyes wide with surprise, and the next, I felt him go inside me. It was as if I was swallowing something whole. His body felt warm against my hands, and I could feel the slight resistance as he tried to pull away, but I didn't let go. The need to have him, to consume him, was overwhelming. It wasn't just hunger, it was a need, a consuming, all-encompassing need that filled every part of me. His body was soft, yielding, as I pushed him into me. I felt every inch of him, his breath, the way his skin shifted against mine. But it wasn't just physical. It was like his essence was becoming a part of me, like his energy, his presence, everything he was flooding through me. I could hear his gasp, his breath hitching in his throat. He didn't scream, not at first. But the way his hands gripped my arms, the way his body twisted in my grasp, told me that he didn't understand. But I did. I did. I wasn't just taking him inside me in the physical sense. I wanted him to be mine, completely. I wanted to feel his heart beating with mine, wanted him to be a part of me in a way no one could ever take from us. I wanted him to never leave me, even if I had to pull him into my own body, into my soul, to make sure he was mine forever. The hunger grew sharper as I felt him slide deeper into me, and I gasped. It was as if a fire was spreading inside me, the warmth of his body and the pressure of him becoming part of me setting me ablaze. My body felt alive in a way I couldn't explain. The way he seemed to fit so perfectly with me, it made me dizzy, my vision blurring, my chest tight with a mix of relief and sorrow. This is it. This was the moment. He would never leave me. But even then, I could feel his pulse racing. I could feel his fear, the way he was trying to hold on to something, trying to fight, but it didn't matter. I could feel his voice inside me, faint at first, muffled like he was calling to me from far away. "Mina," he whispered, his voice trembling with disbelief. "What are you doing? Why?" I didn't want him to say anything. I didn't want to hear the fear in his voice. I wanted him to be silent, to understand that this wasn't something I had control over. This was something that had to happen. It wasn't a choice, it was a hunger I couldn't explain, a need to have him, to keep him inside me. His body pressed closer, and my fingers dug into his skin as I felt him inch deeper inside me, as though I could never have enough. I heard his voice again, softer now, as if he'd given up struggling. "Mina, please," but there was something else in his tone now, something I couldn't quite place, and it felt like he was no longer afraid, maybe he understood. When he was completely inside me, I felt a strange emptiness, a hollow place that used to be my heart, fill up with something I couldn't name. My hands slid down my stomach, my fingers tracing the outline of him, the soft swell of his body inside me. My body trembled with a combination of exhaustion and euphoria, as though I had just crossed some unimaginable threshold. I closed my eyes, letting the tears slip down my cheeks. I couldn't stop crying. The tears were hot against my cold skin. I cried for the hunger that had driven me to this point, for the pain of never being able to tell him how much I needed him. I cried because I had finally gotten what I wanted, but it wasn't the way I had imagined it. It wasn't the perfect dream I had painted in my mind. I wanted him. I wanted all of him. But now, as he lay inside me, I could feel how truly alone I was. And for the first time, I realized that this was never going to be enough. No matter how much of him I had, it would never erase the loneliness inside me. I fell to my knees, clutching my stomach, tears streaming down my face. What have I done? I whispered, my voice breaking. He wasn't just looking at me. He was inside me. At first, I was terrified. My stomach churned, my chest felt too tight, and the tears came fast and hot. I couldn't believe what I'd done, couldn't believe the hunger had consumed me so completely. And then I heard his voice. Mina. My breath caught. Theo? Yes, he said, his voice calm, steady. I'm here. And just like that, the ache was gone. The hollow, gnawing hunger that had consumed me for so long was replaced by something warm and steady. He wasn't just near me, he was with me, closer than I'd ever dreamed possible. I sobbed harder. I didn't mean to, I couldn't. It's okay, he said, his voice soft. I understand. No, you don't, I cried. I just wanted you to notice me. I didn't want this. I noticed you, he said gently. I always noticed you. I just didn't know how to say anything. His words broke something in me. You noticed me. I've always noticed you, he said. And now I'm closer to you than I ever thought possible. I'm happy. When he told me he was happy, that he wanted to be close to me, I couldn't stop crying. But this time, the tears weren't from pain, they were from relief. All the sorrow, all the loneliness, all the desperate longing melted away, replaced by a quiet, profound sense of peace. I wasn't invisible anymore. I wasn't a shadow or a ghost. It was in those moments, as I held my hands over my stomach, my head tilted back to the cold sky, that I heard his voice again, now faint but clear. I love you, Mina, he whispered, as though he were speaking directly to my soul. I've always loved you. I gasped. Theo. He wasn't gone. He was still with me, but not in the way I had imagined. I could feel his presence inside me, as though we were one, connected in a way that no one could ever understand. His voice reverberated through me, soothing the pain, easing the hunger. I'll stay with you, he said. Inside you, forever. I want to be with you. And in that moment, for the first time, I felt complete. Not in the way I had hoped for, not in the way I had dreamt of, but in a way I couldn't turn away from. I walked home that night under a sky full of stars, my hand resting on my stomach. His voice was still with me, a quiet presence I could feel in every step. It wasn't the ending I'd dreamed of. But it was an ending where we were together. And for me, that was enough.